All right, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to start. And so first of all, it's always so fun to talk to the My Health Angels group. So thank you all for joining today. And I've chosen this photo to set the stage for my talk on the science and psychology of goal setting for the new year, because my husband and I have a promise to each other that we will never, ever try to climb Mount Everest. That and doing anything that seems like a lot of pain, a lot of money, the potential to die are all things that we're very comfortable crossing off of our goal list. But I'm using this picture because it's actually a perfect illustration of how individual goal setting is. So there are certainly people in the world who think climbing Mount Everest, that would be this, really great thing to do. And that is my goal that I'm going to spend time and money and energy and effort doing. I have a brother who's 18 months younger than I am, and he has ran 4 or 5 different marathons. He's ran Chicago and New York and Boston and LA and probably one that I'm forgetting. And I asked him at some point, why did you decide to train to run a marathon? And he said, well, I went to watch one of my friends run a marathon. And at the end of the marathon, when you cross the finish line, they wrap you in this big, like silver, aluminum foil kind of blanket, and they give you a banana. And I said, I could wrap you in that kind of a blanket and give you a banana like at any time. Like that doesn't seem like really, would be worth it training for the marathon. But again, it's an example of lots of different factors influence people's motivation to do different things. So I want to start by talking about the most common New Year's resolutions that people make. So I'm just going to pause for a minute. I want you to think for yourself what's going to be on this list. And I bet you're going to be pretty good at guessing. So here are the most common New Year's resolutions. Losing weight is number 1. Now, what's funny is that losing weight is number 1, but as you can see, sticking to a healthier diet and exercising regularly are kind of part of the losing weight one, right? That many people, they want to lose weight, and so they stick to a healthier diet, or so they start exercising regularly. So that's a pretty big category of ones. Another very common one is making better financial choices. This could be, saving money. It could be, spending less, on lattes or, whatever. Quitting smoking was for many years a very common New Year's resolution that people set. This one is actually less common now than it used to be. And that's largely because fewer people smoke. So that when more people smoked, it was a much more common resolution. And now the smoking rates in the United States are much lower than they used to be. So this is still up there, but it's not as high since you have to smoke in order to want to quit smoking. And then finally, spending more time with family. And so this could be, people who are, working a lot, or people who live further from their family and really have sort of this priority. So I now want to turn to ask you all, because I like to get a sense of where people are. I want you to just answer this quick poll. Which of these resolutions have you ever made? I'm not asking if you accomplished it, but which of these have you ever made? And you can answer as many of these or as few of these as relates to you. So I'll just give you, I'll give you about 15 seconds, and then I'll show you the results. I'm going to have a few different kind of polls in this talk, as those of you who've heard me before. I like to do this to sort of replicate what would be if we were all physically together, and I would say, raise your hand, and then I would see the hands go up. So far, we just have a little bit over 50% of people participating. 60% of people have now participated. And I'm going to give it, again, in the interest of time, about 5 more seconds, and then I am going to stop this poll. We've now just hit 70% of people. So if you want to get in your vote about which of these resolutions have you ever made, last chance, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the poll. and I am going to share the results. So as you can see here, many people reported the first three, losing weight, sticking to a healthier diet, and exercising regularly are all reported by over 70% of you. Maybe that was the same 70% of you said yes to all of those three. And then some fewer percentage of people reported making the other ones. So as you can see, these are relatively common New Year's resolutions, especially the first three that many people report making. Now I'm going to turn to a little bit of the bad news. And this is what's the reality. This is not going to be super surprising. But what the data show is that each year of the people who start New Year's, here's my resolution, by the end of the year, only about 12% of people say, yeah, I've stuck with my resolution. I accomplished it. I'm no longer smoking, or I've lost weight, or I've started exercising, or, saving money, or whatever. So what we know is that there's a pretty big fall off from people who intend to reach a goal and work on a goal to people who accomplish it. However, this is the good news. And the good news is that setting New Year's resolutions is actually really effective in terms of increasing your likelihood of actually changing your behavior in some way. So people who set some kind of New Year's resolutions are 10 times more likely to actually change their behavior than people who don't. And so this tells us in psychology that it's actually really good to set a resolution because it helps you accomplish some kind of behavior change, or at least increases the likelihood that you're going to change that behavior. Now, I want to see where you all are again. I'm going to do one more. This was a very quick poll, but I'm going to ask you the following. And this one, you have to just answer one. So have you ever made a New Year's resolution that you failed to achieve? And the answer, the choices are yes, no, or you've never made a resolution. I'm giving you that option as well. All right, and so 75% of you have answered. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And as you can see here, 86% of you said you have at some point failed to achieve it. And then about 14% of people are not the New Year's resolution people. So again, what we can see here is that that is something that happens to many people. All right, so now I want to turn to what is so good about this power of setting goals? Why is it that setting goals actually increases your likelihood of being able to achieve a particular resolution? And there are a couple different reasons. But first, I want to give you a sense of the range of different kinds of things that people might choose to pursue. So these are sort of some random resolutions that sort of illustrate the distinctions. So you could have a resolution of, I'm going to read a book a month. I'm going to exercise this much every single week. I'm going to do a particular task, like clean my garage. This is on my list. I'll just tell you. Starting a new practice. So this could be keeping a gratitude journal. It could be meditating. These would be things that I don't do that, I've been hearing there are good benefits of happiness and health for doing this. So I want to start these new practices. It could also be doing something more outward. So not inward, but outward in your community, such as volunteering. It could be something related to stimulating your brain. So doing a daily crossword puzzle or Sudoku. It could be learning a new skill, such as this year, I'd like to learn to knit. I'd like to accomplish that in some way. So these are all examples of different kinds of things that because it really illustrates that the kinds of goals that we set might be very different, that they might be about a personal habit that you're going to accomplish. They might be about learning a skill or doing a particular task. They might be outward in the community, or they might be something inward. So when we talk about goal setting in psychology, there really can be a range of different kinds of goals. So I now want to have you, and I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about this. I'd like you to think about a goal that you might have for this new year. You're not going to have to share what it is. I mean, you can share what it is later if you want to, but I'd like you to think about a goal that you might have for the new year. And this could be, again, something that you've already set. It could be something that just occurs to you now. It could be something that was your New Year's resolution. But I want to be able to, I want you to have something that you could work on specifically so that when I talk about the rest of the material in this talk, you could actually have that goal in mind and kind of play out some of the specifics. So I'll stop talking for about 10 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I hope everyone has thought of something. And again, just keep that in mind, because when I go through the different steps, you'll be able to then have your goal in mind to sort of use some of what I'm talking about to put into practice. All right. So what's so good about setting goals? One, it gives us a sense of purpose and direction. Hey, I want to accomplish this thing. It's going to give me a direction to go in. It's going to be provide some sort of purpose or framing, in my life in some way. Goals focus attention. So if we have a particular goal, it's actually easier for us to ignore other kind of distracting things. So if I have a goal of, I want to save more money, maybe that's going to help me distract from, I'm going to throw away those catalogs that come to my house because I'm trying to not spend so much money. Or if I have a goal of, I'm going to try to practice healthier eating habits, maybe I'm not going to walk down the aisle of the supermarket that has a lot of junk food in, for example. They increase our effort and motivation. So when we have a particular goal, we are excited to pursue it. We're excited to expend effort towards it and motivate it. I have a goal to finish a crossword puzzle every day, so I'm going to be motivated to expend effort on that until I've actually accomplished it. Goals can prolong persistence. So if we get frustrated with something or we hit a roadblock, if we have a goal, we're more likely to persist and keep working on it and less likely to sort of give up and throw up our hands in some way. Goals also create new learning strategies. So maybe I had this particular goal of I'd like to learn to knit. And I tried to teach myself how to do that by watching videos online and it didn't work. So I'm now going to find a class in my community, or I'm going to talk to a friend who knows how to do it, and I'm going to get advice from them. So that goals also help us develop different strategies of accomplishing our goal. Now, I'm going to share with you 3 key quotes about goal setting. Again, for those of you who've seen me before, I'm really into the quotes. And these 3 quotes really illustrate some of the key findings from empirical literature about the value of goal setting. So I hope that you'll enjoy these. 1, my goal is not to be better than anyone else, but to be better than I used to be. And I really love this one because it tells us something important about goal setting, that what we know about goal setting is it really is internal. So it's not about, am I better than you or you or you, smarter or wealthier or prettier or whatever. The goal setting is very individual. So it's about, hey, am I better today than I was a month ago? So this year, well, actually last year, 2022, I decided to start running. And I am a horrible runner. I look bad and I'm also really slow. But what I really like about it is that I've actually gotten better. I haven't really gotten faster, but I can go for longer. I can run more miles. 3, that's the only thing I'm going for, 3, not a marathon. But I'm not as fast as anyone else. I'm not really as faster than anyone. I don't look better than anyone, but what I know is that I can run more now than I could 2 months ago. And so again, focusing on goal setting as being individual is what's really important. 2, people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. And I really like this one because it points out something important that we know in goal setting, and that's that you do have to increase motivation every single day. that it's not the case where you can just set a goal and then be done. You have to remind yourself, and I'm going to talk about some strategies for doing that later on. The fact that you have to remind yourself and recommit to goals isn't a problem with it. It's actually one of the reasons why many people find goal setting rewarding, is that it has the opportunity to keep invigorated because you are motivated to pursue these goals continually over time. And finally, this is a funny one. This is from Bill Murray. Whatever you do, always give 100% unless you're donating blood. And I like this one in part because it's funny, but and also because it really is the illustration of sometimes you can give 100% to your goals, but sometimes you also can't. Sometimes maybe you have a goal, but this has been a really exhausting week, or this week you had family visiting, so you actually couldn't volunteer or couldn't, practice knitting or doing a crossword or, exercising or whatever. And so I think that it's important to give ourselves some grace, cut ourselves some slack, and be willing to say, hey, if this particular week I was not able to give 100% effort, I can pick it up later on. And that's really a key thing about goal setting. All right. So I now want to get into kind of the nitty gritty, which is what do we know about the principles of effective goal setting? And what we know is that all goals are not created equal, that there are, in fact, better kinds of goals that we can set. So I'm going to ask you now to turn to the goal that I asked you to set about 5 minutes ago for yourself. And I want you to take that goal and to try to use these principles of effective goal setting in terms of revising it in particular ways. If you learn in the next few minutes that maybe the goal that you set wasn't as specifically effective as it could be. So I want you to take your goal and I want you to modify it in different ways based on what I'm going to be talking about. So what do we know about effective goal setting? First, the best goals are specific and they're also able to be measured. This is really important. And I want to give you some examples. Many people set subjective goals, and these goals are pretty vague. I want to lose weight. I want to be more productive. I want to have better relationships. But the challenge with these goals is they're so vague that we never know if we've accomplished them. So if I want to lose some weight, does that mean if I lose an ounce, is that enough? If I lose 1/10 of a pound, is that enough? Or is there a specific amount of weight that we want to lose? If you say be more productive, what does that mean? Does that mean you want your house to be cleaner? Does that mean you want to write more letters? Does that mean what? What does it mean? And again, have better relationships. What does that mean? Better relationships with who? What would be better? Does it mean seeing more people? Does it mean having more relationships? Does it mean having more intimate relationships or these friendships, and so on. So again, these are examples of subjective goals, and they're less motivating because we can never tell if we got there because they're not very specific. So what's better? Objective goals. I want to lose 10 pounds. There's a number. I want to lose 10 pounds. I can figure out, am I accomplishing it? Am I getting closer to it? Am I not getting closer to it? Make daily to-do lists. So maybe my goal is to be more productive. And so what I'm going to do is every day I'm going to write down, okay, these are the kinds of things that I want to accomplish today. And at the end of the day, I'll be able to say, hey, did I do those things? Another example, I want to spend 5 hours a week with friends. So not just I want to have better relationships, but I want to have specifically more time with friends. This is a little bit of an aside, but I'm glad to talk about it more in the Q&A. The New York Times is doing something started this year with something called the Happiness Challenge. And I know I talked with you all about happiness last summer, I think last summer I did the happiness talk, or maybe last fall for you. And one of the key findings from the research in happiness is that the best predictor of happiness is the quality of our relationships, not the quantity, but the quality. So the New York Times actually set something at the start of this year called the Happiness Challenge. And for people who want to follow along, I'm actually talking on Instagram, if you're on Instagram, about this happiness challenge. And specifically what they're doing is they're having people set specific goals related to their relationships to help people have better relationships. So if you're interested in learning more about that, if you follow me on Instagram, I started this exercise yesterday. Today I did the first challenge, and I'm going to be doing it for the next 7 days, but it's saved on my Instagram if you want to kind of follow along. But that specifically is about how do we have better relationships with family members, with neighbors, with friends, and so on. And I super love this happiness challenge because it's all of these things. It's objective, they're specific goals, and they're helping people work through that to have better relationships, which, spoiler alert, best predictor of our happiness. All right. So set specific and measurable goals. That's a key principle of effective goal setting. Another one, set challenging but realistic goals. So if I were in a classroom with you all or in a room, I would be like now drawing on a board. And what I would draw is something called the inverted U. So like a curve that looks like this. And it's a curve that looks like this because what we find in research is that the best goals are set at this sort of moderate level. If you set a super easy goal, I want to walk 1 minute a day. That's not a particularly challenging goal. Everyone does that, just waking up in the morning and, having breakfast or whatever. And so that's not a very engaging goal because it's so easy to accomplish. So walking 1 minute a day doesn't give us any sense of accomplishment. On the other hand, saying I want to walk an hour a day or 2 hours a day might be really unrealistic. Maybe you don't have that much time, or maybe you don't live in a community in which you can do that, or maybe your health is not such that you can do that. So setting a goal that's too hard is also demoralizing. If you set this goal of, I'm going to run a marathon by the end of the month and you haven't run a marathon, then you're like, oh, I failed in my goal pursuit. So what's really important is to set goals that we call at this moderately difficult level, challenging, but realistic. And I'm going to give you an example now of a research study that illustrated this. Researchers compared people in 3 groups. Now, this was a study designed to help people save energy, so to consume less, electricity and hot water and stuff in their house. They assigned people to one of 3 groups. People in one group were asked to reduce their energy use by 20%. That was the challenging goal, 20% less energy use. People in another group were asked to reduce energy use by 2%. So this is like a teeny, tiny little amount. People in the third group were asked to make no changes. This is the control group, so they didn't have them do anything. So then they went and they looked at, a few months later, how did people in each of these groups do? And here's what they found. People in the first group, the challenging goal group, had in fact conserved the most. There was no difference between people who'd been asked to do just 2% and no changes. Because again, being asked to reduce energy used by 2%, it's such a low goal that no one even actually worked towards it. So they actually didn't make any particular changes compared to people who were asked to make no changes. So this tells us that shooting for like a super low level goal doesn't even change our behavior at all. So it's important to choose a goal that's at this moderate level. Now, we also know that it's important to set both short-term and long-term goals. So if you want to, for example, run a marathon, you're not going to do that tomorrow. And yet it's very hard to motivate yourself by a goal that's like very, very far off. So you need to set short-term goals as well, because setting these short-term goals gives you something to work towards in pursuit of this longer-term goal. I'll give an example of how I play this out in my teaching. So during the semester, I have my students have to write a number of papers. But what I found is that college students are very bad at motivating themselves just to work on this paper by the end of the semester, by the end of the month. They're just not very good at time management. So what I do in all of my classes now is I set short-term goals that lead them up to the paper. So if they have the paper due at the end of January, for example, what I say is January 10th, I need to know the topic of your paper and I need your bibliography. So I'm making them work towards that short goal. Then January 20th, I need an outline of your whole paper, or I need a draft of your paper. So again, I'm pushing them to do that next step. And then finally, maybe January 30th, they have to turn in their final paper. But what I have found is that when I set these different assignments, the paper topic and bibliography, then the outline or draft, then the final paper, they do a much better job, because what they've done is I have set these short-term goals that they can then work towards. They can reach them. I then give them feedback, and then their final papers are much better. So in lots of different ways, what the research shows is that setting these short-term goals helps you feel like, oh yeah, I'm making some progress. And that in fact boosts your energy and excitement. Very clever study. They brought in people, and people in one group were given a punch card, and the punch card had 8 squares that you had to punch in order to get a free car wash. So here's sort of an example for me of like coffee, the thing I like the most. Now, people in another group were given a punch card, and it had 10 squares. But then the researcher punched 2 of the squares. So there were 2 like freebies. Now, as you can tell in these conditions, people in both groups had to do 8 car washes in order to get the free car wash. But people in the group with the 2 free punches were 82% more likely to actually get 8 more car washes and get the free wash. So what's fascinating here is that both groups needed to pay for 8 car washes in order to get the free car wash. But the people who had the card with 10 that had the 2 punches were like, oh, I'm already working towards it. I'm already making progress. Whereas people who were just given the card with 8 squares and nothing punched out, they were like, oh, I've got to start from the very beginning. And not having that head start actually made it harder for them to achieve it. So what we know is that setting some short-term goals and working towards them and accomplishing them actually
technical difficulties. Hang on one second. No, she's losing. It's happened earlier, so hold on.
us focus primarily on.
Catherine, just so you know, can you hear me? You're freezing. They're like, do you
I'm
feel?
freezing?
Yeah. Is there anything with your Wi-Fi? I mean, it was just like it happened twice, but like this time was a little longer. I just want to let you know in case it's something with your Wi-Fi.
Oh no, that's terrible. I'm not showing anything with my Wi-Fi, but maybe it is my Wi-Fi. Let me see if I have a child who's streaming thing. That's always
That'll do it.
The challenge of this talk is that my kids are home from college.
Right.
Let me see if
I mean, you're perfect now. It just happened like a few minutes ago. It was only for like a second. This one was a little longer. So I just want you to be aware.
Well, sorry about that. Yes, I'm texting my kids and telling them not to stream since my talk. All right. I'm glad that I'm back now.
Yes, you're good.
All right. I'm good. I'm glad I'm good. Okay. Okay. I'm back. All right. So the next thing is, and apologies if you didn't hear the last thing, set the right kinds of goals. So focus more on process than the outcome. Many people focus on, here is the big outcome that I'm trying to accomplish. But the key is, what we really want to work towards is setting a process that lets us accomplish those outcome goals in a positive and healthy and basically consistent kind of way, so that we're making real changes. We're not just working on the outcome, we're actually working on creating healthy changes to accomplish the outcome. Now, let me give you an example of that. The outcome goals focus on just the result. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to save more money. I want to be richer. I want to have a better GPA, whatever it is. That's the outcome. For a sports team, that is, I want to win the Super Bowl or whatever. But what we really want to focus on are the particular actions that help us accomplish that outcome, the processes that let us accomplish that outcome in a good way. Here are the examples. Let's say you want to lose weight. Your process goals would be things like, I want to eat healthier foods and I want to select smaller portions, or I want to exercise more. You don't want to say, I want to just fast. because fasting is not super healthy and it can lead you to feel dehydrated. It can lead you to feel like, woozy. It can lead you to have trouble concentrating. So the idea of like, well, I'm just going to fast, that's actually a less effective strategy than changing your eating habits. Similarly, if you're a college student and your goal is, I want to improve your GPA, which is a good goal. I like that goal. The goal should be accomplished by spending more time studying more effectively, working with a partner. It shouldn't be accomplished by cheating, for example. That would not be a good way. And so focusing on the process of achieving the goals is what's really important and valuable. Now, you might have heard before about SMART goals. I'm going to ask you actually, just can you raise your virtual hands if you're not on camera, or your actual hands if you are on camera? Have you heard about what a SMART goal is when I say that? I'm just going to ask and see if people have heard about this. So some people are saying yes, and some people I see are shaking no. And so what's interesting about this is that SMART goals are a perfect example of a lot of the principles of really a good goal setting. Okay, so you can put your hands down now. I think some people have heard about it, some people have not. I'm going to give you an example about what they are. So when we talk about SMART goals, they are specific, which I talked about before, measurable, which I talked about before. They are achievable and realistic. That's kind of the idea of setting these like moderately difficult levels. And they also have a time element. They are time bound. So I'm going to ask you now to return to your goal that I had you write, about 10, 15 minutes ago now. And I want you to see if you set a SMART goal. If you did set a SMART goal, way to go, good you. If you didn't set a SMART goal, see if you can modify your goal a little bit to make it more specific, to make it more measurable, to make it more realistic and achievable if maybe you didn't aim for that, and also to put some kind of a time limit on it. And I'm going to give an example of, let's say your goal was, I want to go to California. That's my goal for 2023. I want to go to California. That's actually not a SMART goal for a few different reasons. It doesn't have lots of the different features. So when you say, I want to go to California, well, what does that mean? Do you want to go to San Diego and go to the beach? Do you want to camp in Yosemite National Park? Do you want to go to Disneyland? Do you want to, see Alcatraz and go to San Francisco? What specifically do you want to do? So being more specific about where is going to be helpful. Is it measurable? It is measurable because you either have entered California or you've not entered California. Now, is it achievable and realistic? That kind of depends on a couple of things. So maybe it's achievable and realistic if you live in, let's say, Arizona or Nevada, and it's just a very quick drive. Maybe it's less achievable if you live in Maine or you live in, Florida, because it would take a lot more time and a lot more money. But it's not the kind of thing we're saying like, I'd like to go to the moon, which for most of us is probably not realistic or achievable, even though it would be very measurable and very specific. But it's also important to stay time bound. So if you want to go to California in the next year and that's your goal, when? So sketch out a plan. I'm going to go for a week in June. I'm going to go at Thanksgiving. I'm going to go for a weekend, whatever it is. So setting a more specific goal about where and when and how are you going to get there is actually really important. Finally, and this is a really important one, set the right goal. And when I say set the right goal, it involves a couple different things. One, it involves something that you want, not something that somebody else wants. But it also means really setting what is valuable to you in an important kind of way. There's a lovely story that I actually talk about in one of my books called The Story of the Mexican Fisherman. And I'm going to paraphrase it. It's a short story, but I'm going to paraphrase it quickly here. This story describes a wealthy person in finance traveling to Mexico and going to the beach. When he goes to the beach, he sees a man, a fisherman coming in with his daily catch. And he says, how did your fishing go today? And he said, oh, it went well. I caught a few fish and now I'm just going to sit back and, relax on my boat and look at the water. And the businessman says, well, really, you should go out and you should fish longer. And, in fact, if you fish longer, you would be able to sell so many fish that you could even buy more boats and you could hire people and they would then go out to fish for you. And then you could have like so much more money because you'd have all of these other people helping you, fish and acquire, more boats and so on. And the fisherman said, well, why would I want to do that? And the businessman said, well, because then you would have all this money and you could sit back and relax and sit in your boat and watch the ocean. And the fisherman said, that's what I'm doing right now. And so the key there is that sometimes we have this idea of, I've got to pursue this goal because it's going to allow me to do all of these things. But the question is really, is that goal what you want to do? And if your goal is to sit back in that boat and watch the ocean, and you're already doing that, then you're actually not working towards the right goal. If your goal is just, I want to acquire more and more fish, or money or whatever. So really thinking about, is the goal something that's personally meaningful for you? Is it something that's going to allow you to live a happier, better life in some way? Now, I'll say one more key thing about goal setting, and that is what we know from research in neuroscience is the mere act of setting a goal seems to rewire the brain in particular ways. So setting a goal activates something called the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that is in charge of emotion. And basically, the amygdala understands how important the goal is for you on an emotional level. And goals that are emotionally driven, in fact, help us accomplish and achieve them because they are tying into key emotions that we feel. Now, another part of the brain, the frontal lobe, is kind of the logical, rational, problem-solving kind of the brain, part of the brain. And what the frontal lobe does is it helps you, once you've set a goal, work towards accomplishing it. So how do I solve these problems in order to be able to achieve this goal? So both the amygdala and the frontal lobe are activated once we set and work towards a goal. All right, finally, I'm going to turn to strategies that you can use to achieve your goal. And I'm giving you 10 strategies because I'm really hoping that everyone who's listening today picks up at least one tidbit of something that you can use and implement in your own lives. And again, you can return now to the goal that you wrote down before, and you can modify this goal or modify the strategies in particular ways. I'm going to talk about these 10 strategies, and then I'm going to turn it over to Q&A. So be thinking about, the questions that you have. So 1, pick the right goal and strategy. And when I say this, I mean 2 things. 1, pick a goal that is meaningful for you. As the author Stephen Covey says, motivation is a fire from within. If someone else tries to light that fire under you, chances are it will burn very briefly. So the key here is that it's very hard to work on goals that someone else has set for us. As a parent, believe you me, I know this one well. My kids are not motivated to pursue goals that I set for them. They are only motivated to pursue goals that they have set for themselves. So focus on setting a goal that is meaningful for you, not that somebody else wants you to pursue. But it's also important to pursue the right strategy. So if you take the example of someone playing tennis, for example, for some people, playing tennis is fun because it's like, I'm going to play tennis with a friend and we're going to keep that ball in motion and hit it back and forth across the net. And this is really fun and social and enjoyable. For other people, tennis is fun because there is a winner and a loser. And what I'm excited about by tennis is if I get to beat the other person, if I get to win the game, if I get to win the match. And that's what's exciting. Neither of those are better or worse. They're just different. And so when we talk about the strategy, it's important that you are pursuing goals with a strategy that feels good to you. Maybe you and your friend both want to exercise more in 2023. But there are lots of different ways of exercising. For some people, it might be taking a Zumba class because you like to dance. For somebody else, it might be, I like to jog on the treadmill. For somebody else, it might be playing golf or playing tennis. Again, it doesn't matter what your strategy is. What matters is that the strategy resonates for you. Periodically, I'll do one of these talks and somebody will say, everybody tells me that I should meditate, but I hate meditating. And then I say, well, then don't pick that as a goal. Pick a different goal. Don't choose a goal that you hate. So again, choose a goal and a strategy that resonates with you. 2, make a plan. So this involves setting sub-goals and timeline. Now, we've talked about both of these before. Sub goals are about short-term goals that lead to the longer-term goal. As Napoleon Hill said, a goal is a dream with a deadline. So adding a timeline, not just I want to read 12 books, but I want to read a book a month. And again, by the end of the year, I will have then read 12. So that's an example of a plan that you have different levels of sub goals that will help you achieve that goal. And you have a time frame. By the time the year ends, you want to have read 12 books, for example. 3, write it down. And that was one of the reasons I asked you all to think about a goal, and hopefully a lot of you wrote down your goal. What the research shows is that the mere act of writing down a goal seems to solidify it in the brain. It seems to increase our commitment towards that goal, and it actually makes us more likely to achieve it. Here's a lovely example of the power of goal setting. This is an example of a goal set by Katie Ledecky, who is an Olympic swimmer. And she had a goal prior to going to the Olympics, the Summer Olympics in Rio in Brazil. And here was her goal. She wanted to swim the 400 free in 3 minutes, 56 seconds. And she wanted to swim the 800 free in 8 minutes and 5 seconds. Now, these were both very ambitious goals. These were, world record kind of setting goals. They were very ambitious. But so she set these goals and she wrote the number 565, which was the 5-6 for the 400 free, and then the 5 for the 800 free combined. She wrote those on a training buoy, and she put the buoy in the pool anytime she swam, so that every single day she was going to be aware of this goal, 565, 565. That's her goal. And here were her times in the Rio Olympics. She swam just a little bit slower than she wanted to in the 400 free, 3 minutes, 56 seconds, and then 46/10 of a second. And she swam just under her goal of 8:05 in the 800 free. And both of these were world records, and she got gold medals. So the power of writing it down is really important. We also know, and I talked about this before, that making some progress towards your goal is really important in terms of increasing motivation. Sometimes it can be exhausting and in fact anxiety provoking to have a goal and you just can't get started because you're so worried about what's this first step. There's a wonderful book about writing by the author Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird. And the title for this book comes from a lovely story that she tells in this book. And it's about her brother. And her brother, when he was maybe about 6 or 7 years old, had an assignment for school, which was to do a report on birds. And he was just overwhelmed. There's so many birds in the world. I don't even know how I can get started. And then she tells this lovely story about her dad. And here's a quote from it. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." And so the example here is, listen, don't think about all the different birds. We're just going to go bird by bird. We're going to pick a bird and we're going to write about that bird. And then we're going to move on. And this is the quote that I say all the time to my husband, to my kids. We're going to take it bird by bird. So again, if you have a goal of clean your house, that can be overwhelming. So then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to clean one closet. I'm going to clean one drawer in the kitchen, again. So setting down very, very specific steps can help you then say, okay, I did this. Now I'm going to move on. 5, create rewards and punishments. Now, anyone who's ever toilet trained a kid already knows about this. So creating a reward, creating the sticker chart. Every time you stay dry, for a day or overnight or whatever, you get a sticker, you get a star, you get some kind of, M&M, whatever. That's an example, again, of creating rewards that help us accomplish our goals, giving us a sort of short-term satisfaction. Now, another key aspect of goal setting, which is pretty creative, is also the idea of creating a punishment for not accomplishing our goal. I'm going to give you an example that I actually share with my students in my health psychology class. And this is an example that was given by an African-American woman who was a smoker. And what she wanted more than anything for her goal for the year was to stop smoking. She worried about her health, obviously. So here's what she did. She gave her smoking cessation counselor $500. And she said, if at the end of 6 months, I'm not smoking, I want you to give that money back to me. But at the end of 6 months, if I'm smoking, I want you to take my $500 and I want you to donate it to the KKK. Now, that was very motivating for her because she just couldn't imagine how horrible she was going to feel if she made this donation to this, group that was, clearly racist. So again, that's an example of setting a punishment that can be, again, if I don't accomplish this goal, there's this bad thing is going to. 6, find the right friends. Lots of research has suggested that we benefit from having friends who support and embrace our pursuit of particular goals. This is why 12-step groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, are so effective, because you have a group of people together who are helping support people in making behavior change. So surround yourself with people who are supporting your goal and reinforcing it. 7, recognize and reduce barriers. So if you're pursuing a particular goal, think about things that can get in the way. So if you want to exercise more, but the gym is all the way across town and traffic is horrible in your town and it's going to be hard to get to that gym, that's going to be a barrier to your exercise. So think about ways you can reduce that barrier. Buy a treadmill and put it in your basement or your garage, because then it's right there. You don't have any excuse not to go do it. So thinking through what are different factors that can get in the way of me accomplishing this goal, and then reducing those barriers is what's really important. Even the act of thinking through what are these potential barriers is really effective. Research by political scientists has shown that one of the best predictors of people voting is actually going through and making a specific plan. So they think through, okay, when am I going to vote? Am I going to vote before work? And am I going to vote at lunch? Am I going to, go vote after I have coffee with a friend? So really thinking through, when am I going to vote? Where am I going to park? Where's my polling location, et cetera, substantially increases people's likelihood of actually sticking through with their intention to vote. 8, bounce back from slip-ups and recognize that new habits take time. So the idea here is that sometimes we're pursuing a goal and then we mess up. So I had a goal to exercise, every day. And this week I haven't exercised at all. You need to say, okay, I'm going to get back on that horse. I'm going to return to it and not say, oh, I failed. I'm over. I can't accomplish that goal. This is research showing how long it takes to actually form a new habit. And it often takes about 2 months before you've really established that habit in a full way. So recognize that if you slip up, if you have a bad week and you actually don't do the thing you said you were going to do, just return to it. So take it as a slip up, understand that new habits take time, and then reinvigorate yourself. Researchers often say, you can try a New Year's resolution, but you know what? You can reinvest in that resolution Valentine's Day, for example. Again, there's no magic to January 1. Settle for good enough. And I love this one. This is the expression maybe some of you have heard, never let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Because the idea there is that sometimes people say, well, if it can't be perfect, then I'm just going to give up. So, maybe you have a goal of running 3 miles and you're only able to run 2 miles. That's better than nothing. Maybe you have a goal of exercising 45 minutes a day and you only make it to 30 minutes a day. That's better than nothing. Maybe you have a goal of reading a book a month and you're only getting through about half a book. That's also good enough. So basically cut yourself some slack, settle for good enough, and remember something, it's better than nothing. Don't beat yourself up if you don't accomplish your exact goal. Finally, reevaluate goals and strategies if necessary. So maybe you have a goal of reading a book a month, but at the end of January, you're like, you know what? I'm really not enjoying this. I thought I was going to enjoy it. I thought I was going to like it. Maybe you're picking up the wrong kind of book. Maybe instead of reading a book, you want to listen to a book on tape or a podcast. Maybe you want to modify that goal or your strategy of accomplishing it. And you know what? That's fine. Setting a goal is not like getting a tattoo. You can modify your goal, you can change it. And if it's not working for you and it doesn't feel good, shape it, shift it, and reevaluate it. That's absolutely fine. All right, I'm going to stop now because I do want to do one more poll question, and I want to see which of these strategies do you find most helpful? And for this one, you can say more than one. You know, you're not just limited to one, but I want to just get a sense of, for you, which of these different techniques have you found most helpful in your own life, or do you think will be helpful as you think about goal pursuit moving forward? Maybe you've learned something new in what I've shared today. And remember to pull the poll all the way down so you can see the items at the end. I have given you all 10 that I talked about. And again, different ones might be useful for different people. Different ones can also be useful for different kinds of goals that people set. All right. And just seeing the different responses people have done. What's interesting is that somebody has already chosen at least one of these, which I think really speaks to that different kinds of goals may rely on different strategies, and also different people may find different kinds of things helpful. I'm hoping that everyone was reminded about good things to do for their own goal pursuit, and maybe even got something that they can use. All right, and so 54% of people have already participated, which is great. I want to make sure that I'm leaving adequate time for Q&A. And so I'm going to give it about another 5 seconds or so. Ooh, maybe give it 10 seconds. So we've now had 60% of people vote. I know there are a lot of different answers, so people may take a minute to kind of scroll down. And don't worry, I will share the responses. And then I will turn it over to Q&A next. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat room and I can look at them that way, but I think you can also raise your hands, and I think Nicole will call on people and facilitate that as well. Okay, so I'm going to count down to 5, and then I am going to end the poll and I will share the responses. So if you want to get in your vote, this is your last chance. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I think we had, the last few people just voted. I think we just got up to 69% of people. Now we've hit 70. Okay. Sorry for rushing you. Okay. So I am going to share now. So you can see here in the sharing the results that, let's see, the number one thing that people thought was the most helpful was to make a plan, including sub goals and a timeline. That was 76% of you said it. 66% said take a single step in the right direction. 61% said write it down. I think those were the biggest winners. So thank you so much for listening. As you can tell, I have like lots of excitement about this topic. I think that Ashley is going to send a copy of my slides, which I've already sent to her. I said before, I'm on Instagram at Sanderson Speaking, if anybody wants to follow me there, and I'm talking about the happiness challenge. And my book, The Positive Shift, talks a lot about sort of different strategies for goal setting, particularly related to sort of health and happiness. So if that would be useful to you, you can check that out on Audible or Amazon or independent bookstores anywhere. And I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can all kind of see each other a little bit better. And I'm going to stand up and turn on my light because the sun went down.
Yeah,
and now
go ahead.
I'm like the absolute darkness. I started the day with it being dark.
Yeah, no worries.
Don't want you to think
There you go.
Sleep.
Out there,
There we go. So now you can see me. Anyway, so there I am. So looking forward to any questions that you all have. As you can tell, I love talking about psychology, and I really hope that everyone got something they can use.
Yeah, no, this was absolutely amazing and so helpful. And there was definitely a couple of questions that came in. So Rose asked, what type of goals might you recommend for someone who has had depression for about 3 years, but's now on medication to help it, but still somewhat alone?
So in all honesty, and thank you so much for asking that question. That's such an important question. What we know in psychology is that loneliness is actually as bad as smoking in terms of our health. So loneliness is really a chronic problem. It's epidemic in our society. And so it's really, really important to recognize that people need to reach out, they need to get support, and they really need to set relationship goals. So I talked before about this, the happiness challenge in the New York Times. And the happiness challenge in the New York Times is a perfect example of working on what they call social fitness, which I absolutely love because it's really about our social relationships are so very important. And so setting goals related to relationships is just extraordinarily important. Now, that could be a lot of different things. So that could be setting goals in terms of spending more time with family members or friends. It could also be joining social groups like My Health Angels or a book group or, a bridge club or a bowling league or whatever. It can be almost anything. But what we know is that it's really, really important to set and work towards relationship goals, and even small amounts of time, waving to your neighbors, again, having little interactions with people in the supermarket, that all of those things can be really useful and really effective. But the key answer there is set some goals related to relationships is essential.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really important.
And do you recommend long-term goals versus short-term goals to help keep updating your goal setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really crucial. I think it's really crucial because, again, the challenge is that we want to work towards long-term goals, but you can't work towards long-term goals unless you are working towards short-term goals, because it's too a year away, in December, or, whatever. And so setting short-term goals increases motivation in that way.
And what about, I mean, this is sort of fits in here. Do you recommend trying to make amends with family and friends that you feel like you owe them an explanation or an apology?
I think if you feel that you do, then yes, because the reality is, when we feel that we've done something wrong, or we kind of carry guilt or regret or anxiety, it actually is bad for us at sort of a psychological and a physical level. And so if there are people in your life, and it could be family members, it could be friends, neighbors, colleagues, whatever, it's really important to take the first step. And again, it doesn't matter. I mean, it might not even particularly be effective. I mean, it's possible that it won't be well received, but that isn't on you. What's on you is saying, this is what's really important in terms of, I feel I want to owe you an apology or an explanation or something like that.
Okay. And what if you set a goal, but you keep putting off getting started with the goal?
Yeah. So boy, does that happen. That happens to lots and lots of us in lots of distinct ways. And so I'm going to say a couple things about that. One, it's really important to say, how can I achieve that goal better? So for example, is it possible that you could get a friend who's going to support you in that goal in some way? So is it possible that you could say, hey, you know what, I'm having trouble getting started. I'm going to have an accountability group, or my neighbor or my friend or something else to help me get started. It's also some of the things that I talked about today. So could you say, all right, I want to clean my house, but I cannot get myself motivated. So what's my specific plan? So what's the day? What time tomorrow am I going to do it? Setting up a reward. So for example, I talked before about how I've started running. I hate running. I mean, I really hate running, but I listened to a podcast that is kind of frivolous, kind of silly. It's not, serious at all, but it's kind of like, trashy TV. And what I've promised myself is I can only listen to that podcast while I'm running. I can't listen to it when I'm cleaning my house. I can't listen to it when I'm driving. I can only listen to it when I'm running. And that's an example of I've had to force myself to do that in terms of setting up this reward. So if you have a goal that you're not working on, that you're not getting started on, think about all the different things I talked about today and figure out setting up a plan, getting some accountability with a friend, setting up a reward, starting small, taking a first step, et cetera. Those are all ways, again, of saying, okay, now I've done it, et cetera. One good strategy that I didn't talk about today, but it's also announce the goal. So say to your friends, say to your family members, I'm stopping smoking. I am starting running. I am going to start reading, et cetera, because then people can be like, hey, how's that going? And then you don't want to be like, oh, well, I don't do that anymore. And so again, saying it aloud is what's really effective.
Okay. Allie, I see your hand up.
Thank you so much. What a great presentation. Oh my goodness, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you, Catherine and Nicole, and the team for bringing such great information to us as a community. So my question is this, excuse me. There are two quick questions, actually. Number one, to piggyback on the question posed about making amends, what if there are toxic relationships and we have been attempting to create reunification within those relationships, and it just continues to not go well? Does the research show it's better to not abandon ship, but just, I guess, experience and embrace radical acceptance and then create like a surrogate community, a surrogate family kind of a thing, so that there's still the opportunity to build connection and to have and reap the benefits of those types of relationships, instead of kind of casting pearl before swine, let's just say, without judgment. Yeah.
Yeah, love that question.
Mhm.
And so I'll say a couple things about that. Number one, your question really reminds me of the expression, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah.
you can't fix all relationships. And it's also the case where sometimes relationships aren't healthy for a person. So you think about, cases of domestic violence or whatever. There are times in which a relationship is not healthy. So what we know in the research is two things. One, that it doesn't matter what the relationship is. So you can have like a good relationship with a family member, a friend. You can have, people who you consider your family, but it's not blood, or whatever. And so what matters is that we have relationships, that we have people. They don't have to be people who fit particular labels, in our lives. What matters is that you have community and that you have support, in some way. And so having positive, good relationships in your life is what's important. It doesn't matter the label on them. So somebody asked a question before about if you feel you've done something, wrong, and that you want to make amends for. If you feel like, oh, I owe this person an explanation, or, I abandoned them, or, whatever, or I need to make amends, and you're going to have regret if you don't do it, then you should reach out. But if you've tried and you've done what you can do on your end, then you can say, hey, you know what? I feel good. I did what I could do, and the person was not receptive or was not responsive or didn't change their behavior, and being with them is actually causing me more stress than not. I'm going to build relationships with you and you instead. And that, in fact, is significantly healthier.
That's wonderful. So building a prosthetic tribe, so to speak.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I love that example, because what's key is that it takes the village, or a tribe, but it doesn't have to be, the people who gave birth to you, or the people who are your, biological siblings, or the people who are, whatever. What matters is that it's people.
Excellent. And my second really quick question is this. If one has a cognitive impairment, executive functioning wise, and they are highly motivated to set and execute goals, excuse me, execute and achieve goals, but it continues to be somewhat an elusive process, when do we bring in the experts? When do we get support? Maybe hire a professional to be a provider to work alongside us. And who would that person be? Is that a coach or what? Social worker?
Yeah, right. No, that's a great question. So I think that, two things really strike me in terms of that question. So one, in some cases, that's actually the kind of thing that a therapist, could be helpful with. In some cases, executive functioning can be improved with some kind of medication. So for example, we know a fair amount with kids and ADHD, or attention deficit disorder, that in fact, it's very, very beneficial in terms of having some medication to basically correct for neurological imbalances in the brain and in terms of chemicals. So in some cases, executive functioning issues are related to, can be treated with medication. In other cases, they can actually be treated through psychotherapy, or through a coach, or through other kinds of assistance. So the example of a social worker, or somebody else to sort of say, hey, I want to keep you organized, I want to keep you on task, or here are these different kinds of things to do. So a lot of it really depends on what is causing the issue. Something that's caused by an attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder is different than something that's being caused by dementia, is actually different than something that's being caused by depression. And so part of it is sort of figuring out what's the root cause of the challenge in terms of goal achievement. Does that help?
It does. And I'm thinking, and that's excellent, an excellent response. If in the event of someone having had like a biomechanical injury, like a traumatic brain injury, acquired brain injury, some kind of neurodegenerative condition where medication is not going to build that skill back up, who would the professional be?
So it sort of depends on what is the nature of the, like, what is the manifestation of that as a problem. So there's a different solution if it's the person is not able to manage their money versus if they're not able to dress themselves versus if they're not able to drive versus if they're not able to whatever. So it sort of depends on what is the skill deficit that's causing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad if you want to, Nicole or Ashley, you can send my
Yeah.
email around to people.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to ask me a question sort of offline, I'm glad.
Yeah.
To
Yeah, because this is a little off
offline
topic.
about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, for sure. We're gonna send that in the recap. We'll have your information and you can reach out directly.
to me. I'm glad to share my thoughts about,
Yeah.
a specific situation.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Important question. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Mariana, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. You talking, hi. You said one thing, the quality of the relationship is a lot better than, say, if it's just a family member and you don't have other ties than there being blood. Quality is a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah.
The quality of that relationship of other people that you know and you've been with, they support you. That's a lot better than just blood ties,
100%. No. And there's some quote that I'm not going to remember well, but it's really that, I mean, we say blood is thicker than water, but that may not at all be true, right? I mean, there are people that, have your back and that are sort of like your intentional family. And that can be really valuable. As I've said to Nicole and Ashley before, I think repeatedly, I've been doing these talks for about a year now, I think. I think that's about right.
A little over, yeah.
A little over a year.
Yeah.
That in fact, these, the My Health Angels is frankly an excellent example of a community, right? It's a community, and probably, I mean, maybe some of you are siblings, or maybe you're just sitting there with your spouse or whatever, but most of you are not blood relatives to each other, and yet it's a community. And I've said that before, that I think one of the reasons why I've so enjoyed doing these talks is that really My Health Angels is like a perfect example of providing a community of support to people.
Yes, and from people all over in so many different states.
All over. Yeah, all over, right?
So different than your local community, chapters and groups, so that you get so many perspectives.